Hello and welcome to Season Stitches. My name is Dayla and today I'm going to show you guys how to make my easy peasy knit pumpkin. Now if you can knit in the round, long tail cast on, do the knit, stitch, purl, and knit two together, then you already know all the techniques needed to make these. If you're a little bit newer than that, then stick around because I'm going to be coming out with some more in-depth, detailed tutorials for all of those different techniques. Now you can use any weight yarn to make this pattern. Look at this chunky boy. This was made with number 6 bulky weight yarn. This guy's made with Aran weight, which is a little thicker than your number 4 medium worsted weight. Now, whichever weight you choose, you want to stick with the needle that's recommended on the ball band of the yarn, unless you know that you're a super loose knitter. If you are, you might want to consider going down a half or even a full size on your knitting needle, because if your stitches are too loose, you're going to have stuffing poking through the holes, and that's not exactly the look we're going for today. So, all that being said, let us make our own easy peasy knit pumpkins. All right, so jumping right in, let's talk about what we need first. I am making a pumpkin using some Aran weight Tweedy wool yarn. So that's what I'm using, and I have 5.5 millimeter 16-inch Addy circular needles. That is what I will be working with. You could go down to like a 12. That might make some of the beginning rows easier, as I'll show you in a second. But that's what I have, so that's what I'm using for this weight of yarn. Next up, you will definitely need a good pair of scissors. And you're going to need some cinnamon sticks for the stems. I think this whole pack on Amazon was like $8. They're ridiculously cheap, super affordable. And you will definitely also need some darning needles for the end. I prefer the kind with the, whoop, I'm dropping stuff everywhere. I prefer the kind with the little bent tips. Use whatever you prefer. Isn't this cute? I got this from my local yarn shop. It's a little darning needle holder. Oh, last but not least, you're gonna need some cute little twine, because I like to use the twine to tie a little bow around the stem because I just think that's super cute. So you're going to need some of this twine. I think I got this at the dollar store for $1. So there we go. That's pretty much everything we need to get started. And I'm going to start by pulling about, for this weight of yarn and this size needle, here's a little cheat for you. It's about 3 feet that you're going to need to cast on for 42 stitches. So let's make a slip knot. I'm just eyeballing it too. It's not an exact measurement. So the way I do it is I just make a loop around my finger, and then the tail end goes underneath, and then I just pull that through. There we go. Slip my needle in. And I'm just doing a long tail cast on. So here we go. And I'm not going to do it too tight. Kind of fairly on the looser side. And you'll see why on the first row. At least on my 16-inch needles, it gets way too tight if I do this too tight. So, gotta do what we gotta do. So I'm gonna keep going until I hit 42, and I'll meet you back here. All right, I've got 42 stitches on here, and as you can see, I've got a little bit of a tail, but that's fine. I prefer it to kind of be a little shorter, but whatever. So as you can see on my 16-inch needle, that's not quite enough stitches to stretch around, but I'll show you what I do to get around that little problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I'm actually going to just split the stitches and pull some cord through. And I'm kind of keeping these sitting in my left hand here so that they don't flip and twist around. All right, there we go. So there's a lot of fancy ways to join in the round, and some of them I do for like a hat brim or something when they're going to show. But on these little pumpkins, your cast on edge is your bottom edge of your pumpkin, so it will never show. It's going to get cinched tight, and it'll even kind of be up inside the pumpkin a little bit. The bottom is a bit concave when we're finished. I am just going to do a super basic way of joining in the round, which is just to literally start knitting. So we're going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to purl 3. 1, 2, 3, and that's the repeat. So let's do that again. We're going to knit 4 again. 2, 3, 4, and then purl 3. 1, 2, 3. We've got one more stitch here, which is definitely not enough to continue our pattern. So I'm going to pull this cord through, and then I'm going to create a new split. I don't want to do it right where the join is. I'm just going to give it a few more stitches ahead of that, just because I don't want the join to get super stretched out. It's fine. It won't come out or anything, but I don't know. I just try to not put so much stress on it right there. Okay, so we were at 3 purls, so let's knit 4 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then purl 3. And that is the entire pattern, rounds 1 through 29, and then round 30 is a bit different. 2, 3 purls. Let's knit 4 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to continue doing that, and I'll meet you back when you get back to the join. All right, so I've made it back to the join. I ended with 3 purls here, and so we're just going to go start round 2 by just repeating the pattern. If it's a knit stitch, knit it. If it's a purl stitch, purl it. And they all should line up as long as your counts are correct. So I'm just going to knit 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm still actually, now on round 2, I think all my stitches fit well enough that I don't have to split the stitches anymore and pull some of the cable through. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's my 4 knits. Now I've got 3 purls here. So this is round 1 through 29, and you could actually, this pattern is in a repeat of 7. So if you wanted to make an even bigger pumpkin, you would increase by 7. You would cast on an extra 7, or 14, or 21. It has to be a multiple of 7. Likewise, if you wanted to make a smaller one, subtract in multiples of 7. You would probably have to switch to DPNs if you did that, though, because it would get pretty tight even on a 12-inch needle if you took 7 more stitches out. So I am going to continue knitting until I finish round 29, and you can do the same, and we will meet back here. All right, there we go. So I have 29 rows here, and I don't know how most people count their rows, but I actually do count the cast on row. So let's go over here. We can see a little better. So that first loop is part of the cast on, but I do count it. So 1, 2, 3, all the way up. 29 is here. I don't count the live stitches on the needles because technically they haven't actually become a stitch yet. They could become anything. They could be casted off, and therefore you wouldn't want to count them here. But anyway, so what we're going to do with this is row 30 waiting to happen. We are going to knit 2 together all the way around. And if you don't know how to do that, it is pretty self-explanatory. You literally, instead of just knitting into 1, you're going to knit 2 together. And sometimes it's a little tricky to get them through, especially if you've got fuzzy splitty yarn like me, but here we go. So there you go. Off. That is 2 together. Again, knit 2 together. And you are going to do this all the way around. Make sure I didn't split my yarn there. All the way around, last row. And technically you could actually skip this step. I have it in the pattern because I think it gives the top of the pumpkin a more polished look before we cinch it shut. If you were to skip this, then your top might look a little bit more puckered around your cinnamon stick stem. I just feel like this gives a little bit smoother finish, but you can totally skip it and you would just knit the round 30 the same as the rest. So there we go. I'm just gonna go around and we'll meet back here at the starting stitch. All right, there we go. So I went all the way around knitting 2 together. I'm back at the starting stitch now. And since I'm using my 16-inch needles, I did split the stitches for the last few because they were getting really tight. This would not be an issue if you're on a 12-inch circular needle or if you're using DPNs. So there you go. If you're using 16s like me, 16-inchers, you're probably gonna have to split the stitches and get this out because it was getting pretty tight. But anyways, that being said, it is now time to grab our needle. Come here. I'm gonna use my bigger one because this is a thicker yarn. And actually need to cut a tail. You're gonna want a pretty long tail. I'm giving it about 3 feet or so because that's gonna give us plenty of yarn to cinch shut, but also I'll show you how to do this, but we're gonna weave through the ribbing and give it tighter ribbing, so that'll be really cool. We'll go through the middle of all the purl sections. So thread your needle, and then we are just gonna go around and take all the stitches off. So you don't want to start with this one that has the lead on it. You want to go over here to the opposite. You want to start with the one that has the yarn on it. Go over here, stitch number 1, 2, here we go. They've all been knitted 2 together, and we're gonna pull this out and give ourselves way more slack there. There. That gives us way more slack to work with. Okay. So you just catch each loop as it comes off your knitting needles and onto the darning needle. All the way around. Twist it there. Okay. Catch them all. Last one here. There we go. All the stitches are off. All right, so we have all of our stitches. They're all caught and threaded by this. So what we're actually going to do next is just pull this and cinch it shut. And you want to leave at least about a 1/2 inch of a hole there, just enough for your cinnamon stick stem, however big that might be. And you know what you can actually do is put your cinnamon stick in there and tighten it down. And then you're going to want to weave this through a loop or 2 like that. And we're going to knot it because this will stretch out or get closed too tight, depending on how tight you're doing your cinching up the ribbing. So let's make sure we get a nice knot on it. It doesn't have to be super tight around the cinnamon stick, especially if you do plan to use hot glue like I do. You just wouldn't want it to be like gaping because then you'd see some stuffing showing through and it's just not as pretty. So there we go. All right, so that's done. That'll be the top. The bigger hole is the top. And next we are going to stuff it. And for this size pumpkin, this is a worsted weight yarn pumpkin. Probably about just 1 generous handful should do it. We've got a nice, see how it's like nice and plump? Actually, that might be a little bit too much. If you put too much, it's gonna like stretch this open a lot and you'll see the white stuffing showing through, which I'm not a fan of that look. So we're just gonna do that. All right, and then once it's stuffed really pretty like that, you've got the shape that you want, you can kind of eyeball it by doing that. And we are actually gonna just go straight up and out like this. There's our needle. Come here, you. There it is. Oh, perfect. Actually went through right there. I guess that's fine. Okay, so I threaded it through. It's coming up through the stuffing. And then from there, we're just going to weave through all the way around these cast on loops. I'm going to get it started here. Oh, a little snag there. All right, so this is technically the bottom of the pumpkin. Okay, so I wove through all the way around and we are back. And you're gonna wanna weave your yarn tail through all of these top loops, in and out. You should go all the way around back to your starting stitch. So now you literally just pull it till it's puckered nice and tight. There you go. And give that a little tug and it'll start to shape your pumpkin. Isn't that cute? Look at that. It's all coming together. And just cinch it good and tight, and then I'm actually gonna go through here one more time. Come up through the top, the opposite side from where we went down. There we go. All right, we're gonna pull it through just like that, and this will allow us to make it a little bit tighter. So it's super cute. It actually looks like a pumpkin now, and you could leave it like this if you like how it looks, and then you would just put the stem in, but I like to weave through these purl sections all the way down, round and around. So I'm going to show you how I do that. All right, so I'm literally just going to come through, and you basically, you can just eyeball it through the middle. It really does not have to be perfect. I kind of just go every other purl. So we're coming up to the center. Once again, it really doesn't have to be perfect, but you just eyeball it. There we go. I'm gonna pull this through gently right now still. And then we're gonna come up, just poke it straight down and then come up. And you wanna make sure you're not crisscrossing yarn back and forth through here because your cinnamon stick needs a spot to go. So we went down right there. So we're gonna come up for this spot next. So I'm just gonna use my finger to kind of feel it out. Guide the needle through. There we go. We're going to go through this section. But first, let's tighten this a little bit. See how it kind of makes the ribbing a lot more defined, flat versus when I cinch it up. So we're just going to keep going. Once again, you just kind of eyeball where the center is down through the purls. Could not be any easier. So this is where the bent tip really comes in handy. You can get much better leverage through all the stitches. A straight one will definitely do the job too. It's just the bent tip makes it a little bit easier. We're getting real close there, so I'm just gonna go through. Let's pull this through first. There. All right. So we did that one, that one. Now we want to aim for this section of purls. So I'm gonna flip it, kind of feel it out, and guide that through. There we go. Tighten that down a little bit. See, look at that ribbing. Although there is something about like just the pudgy cuteness of knitting and purling pattern all the way up. All right, so again, eyeball it. I'm gonna finish the rest of these and then you can meet me back here. All right, so we just need to tie it off so that we can lock in the tension of our ribbing, and we're not gonna do that through the top. I prefer to go through the bottom, of course. So let's just move our needle and yarn tail back to the bottom. And then you're just going to want to find a little loop that you can go into. And we're going to make sure we knot this a few times. I don't know if your pumpkin will go through as much abuse as mine will, but I've got a few kiddos that might be a little rough with it. So I'm just going to do some extra knots for some overkill here. Oh, by the way, just so you know, the squashiness or the height of your pumpkin is determined by the tension on your ribbing. So the tighter you pull it, the more squashy your pumpkin will be. So I'm all done. I'm going to cut my yarn tail, and that's pretty much it. We are ready to put our stem in. All right, so if you are not going to be doing any hot glue, all you have to do is put the stem in there. And I actually like to move the stuffing side to side to make a better hole for it to sit in. And it would sit on a shelf just fine like that, but I'm going to be putting some hot glue in there. Alrighty, I've got my glue gun heated up, ready to go. We've got our cinnamon stick with the twine. So all you need is just a little bead of glue in there. And then I'm actually going to do a tiny bit around the edges of the cinnamon stick as well. Set that down off to the side, and in it goes before the glue cools off. Just hold that for a few seconds. You just want to make sure it's nice and secure. So there we go. That's probably good enough. I'm going to let it sit for a little bit longer anyways, but that's all there is to it. Isn't it so cute? Ugh, I'm obsessed.